Rain turned the front steps to black glass, and Helena McCarthy's hands were so numb she could not feel the brush by the time the hall clock struck 7. January had settled into Bath in a damp, grinding way that crept through wool and skin and bone alike. The stone under her knees bit through her skirt. Dirty water soaked her cuffs. Her breath smoked white in the morning dark. Behind her, somewhere in the bright warmth of the breakfast room, china clinked and Lady McCarthy gave orders in the same tone she used for dogs and debtors. "She may remain there until she learns manners," her stepmother had said 10 minutes earlier, after Helena had made the mistake of answering too quickly when asked whether the cook had paid market rates for fish. "If she insists on speaking like a fishwife, she may scrub like one." Helena had lowered her eyes because that was safer than meeting Lady McCarthy's gaze, and had taken the bucket without another word. At 22 she had long since discovered that silence, used carefully, could be both shield and blade. A spoken retort earned punishment at once. A swallowed one could be saved for a document, a witness, a ledger line out of place. Her father had taught her many things before fever took him: Latin verbs, the shape of a good argument, how to fold letters so wax would not crack in transit. But the lesson that endured most usefully in his widow's house was this: read every contract as if it were a sermon preached by the devil in borrowed robes. She scrubbed until the worst of the soot streaks lifted. The rain began again, thin and mean. Her fingers shook as much from cold as from fury she would never display. From the lane came the rattle of carts and hoofbeats heading toward market. From inside, the scent of coffee and toasted bread she would not be offered until others had finished. A maid of 13, Molly, opened the side door just enough to peer out. "Miss Helena, Mrs. Gray says come in before you freeze. Her ladyship has gone upstairs to dress." Helena rose carefully, joints stiff, and carried the bucket around the side passage. In the scullery heat, pins and needles' pains stabbed through her hands as feeling returned. Mrs. Gray pushed a chipped mug toward her without comment. It held tea gone tannic and lukewarm, but Helena drank as if it were medicine. "You should have held your tongue," the cook muttered, not unkindly. "I did," Helena said. Mrs. Gray snorted once, as if to say that in this house that scarcely mattered. By 8 she was in the morning room, adding columns in Lady McCarthy's household book, while 2 younger half-sisters practised scales badly at the pianoforte. Helena's figures were neat, spare, exact. She corrected an entry where coal had been charged twice, and moved 3 guineas from dressmaker sundries to cards. If she did not keep the accounts honest, no one did. If she kept them too honest, Lady McCarthy accused her of insolence. There was no correct speed at which to walk a blade. When she looked up, she caught her reflection in the dark window. Dark hair pinned without fashion. A narrow, pale face. Eyes too large to be called pretty by any lady who valued softness. Plain, the neighbours called her, as if they were passing sentence. Helena had come to suspect that plain in a woman often meant only this: difficult to dismiss with one glance. Near noon, Lady McCarthy swept in, rustling in plum silk and impatience. "You will take these notes to Mrs. Pennington and Colonel Reeves at once," she said, dropping 3 folded billets onto the ledger. "And if anyone asks, I have not played cards in a fortnight." "You hosted whist on Tuesday," Helena said, before caution caught up with her. Lady McCarthy's smile sharpened. "And you will remember, if asked, that memory is an imperfect instrument in women." Helena gathered the notes. "Yes, ma'am." At the door, Lady McCarthy added, "Do not dawdle. You are not walking for pleasure." "No," Helena thought, stepping into the wet street with her cloak pulled tight. "I never am." Bath was all polished crescents and mud if one knew where to look. Sedan chairs bobbed past apothecary boys and flower girls. Gentlemen in good coats picked dry stones, while servants splashed through gutters. Helena moved quickly down toward Milsom Lane, notes tucked inside her glove. Rain veiled the houses and made distant figures blur to ghosts. She had nearly reached the turn by the old smithy when shouting rose ahead. First one voice, then many. A horse screamed. Helena broke into a run. An equipage had overturned where the lane narrowed. One wheel spun uselessly in the air. The team, half tangled in traces, plunged and struck sparks from stone. A groom clung to one bridle, sliding in mud. Another man lay near the ditch, not moving. From inside the tilted carriage came a child's thin, gasping cry. No one seemed to know whether to pull, cut, or pray. "Get back from the horses!" Helena shouted, before she realized she had taken command. "You, take their heads. Keep them turned uphill. If they see the wheel, they'll bolt." A carter obeyed at once, perhaps because her tone admitted no debate. Helena dropped to her knees at the broken door. The panel had split. She could just reach through. "Can you hear me?" she called in. "Little one, where are you?" A small gloved hand appeared in the dark. Helena caught it. The child inside was wedged between squabs and a collapsed footstool, sobbing with controlled terror that said she had been taught not to scream. Helena braced one boot against the axle and hauled gently. The girl slid free with a strangled cry and fell against Helena's chest. "Good," Helena said, though her own heart was hammering. "Good girl, keep your face here." She pushed the child toward a woman from the crowd. "Take her back, keep her warm." Then a man's voice came from the far side of the wreck, low and steady despite pain. "My niece!" "Safe," Helena answered, crawling toward him through rain and splintered wood. He was trying to lever himself free, blood dark on his sleeve, one shoulder pinned under a brass rail. Even muddied and half-trapped, he carried an authority that rearranged the air around him. His coat was cut from excellent cloth. His expression was controlled to the edge of severity. "Do not move yet," Helena said. "If the shoulder is dislocated, you'll worsen it." His brows lifted a fraction at being ordered. "You speak as if from experience." "I speak as someone with eyes." "Hold still." With help from two men she did not know, she lifted the rail enough for him to pull clear. When he stood, he swayed once. Helena caught his uninjured arm without asking leave. Blood from a deep scrape along his forearm ran freely now. The pressure had changed. "Sit," she said, "somewhere that is not the road." A crate from the smithy served. Helena tore a strip from her petticoat hem with her teeth and hands and wrapped his arm firmly. "That was expensive linen," he observed, watching her. "It is now a bandage." The corner of his mouth shifted, not quite a smile. Around them his servants had arrived, breathless and appalled, finally restoring recognizable order. One footman began issuing contradictory instructions. "No!" Helena snapped. "Not that horse, the near one. He favours his left and will go down if you pull him backward. Cut the trace first." Again people obeyed her. Only when the child, 8 perhaps, all dark curls and shock-wide eyes, was lifted into a hackney and wrapped in cloaks, did Helena step back. Mud streaked her skirt to the knee. Rain dripped from her lashes. She remembered abruptly that she was holding Lady McCarthy's gaming notes, and that lateness would be punished whether or not she had rescued anyone. The injured gentleman had risen. Up close, he seemed younger than she had first thought, perhaps 35, with a face composed in hard lines that life had carved and discipline had set. "My name is Sebastian Vale," he said, "Duke of Ashford." The title moved through the onlookers like wind through leaves. Helena merely inclined her head. "Miss Helena McCarthy." He repeated it once, as if committing it to memory. You have my thanks, Miss McCarthy. See that your arm is properly stitched, she said, wiping rain from her cheek with the back of her wrist. And do not let the child be alone tonight. Before gratitude could become questions, and questions gossip, she turned and walked away, fast. By the time she had delivered the last note and returned home, Lady McCarthy's displeasure had already fermented to full strength. "You are an hour and 20 minutes late," she said from the drawing-room sofa. "I begin to think the weather rots punctuality in girls as it does apples." "There was an accident in Milsom Lane," Helena said. "A carriage overturned." "And naturally you decided to play heroine in the mud." "There was a child inside." Lady McCarthy gave a delicate shudder. "How theatrical! Next time remember that you are not employed to rescue strangers. You are employed to be useful." Useful, Helena thought, was Lady McCarthy's cleanest word for captive. 2 days passed in brittle quiet. Helena copied invitations, mended cuffs, balanced a wine merchant's account to the farthing, while pretending not to hear her stepmother speculate aloud about debts that clever girls might settle if they had any gratitude. On the third afternoon, while rain battered the windows again, a liveried servant announced a caller. Lady McCarthy arranged her expression into gracious surprise as Sebastian Vale, Duke of Ashford, entered her drawing-room. He was bandaged at the wrist, otherwise immaculate. The room seemed to shrink around his reserve. Helena stood by the escritoire with a stack of folded correspondence and tried to become furniture. "Your Grace," Lady McCarthy trilled, "what an honour! We had heard of your unfortunate mishap. Pray be seated." "I will not detain you long," he said. His gaze moved once to Helena, then returned to Lady McCarthy. "I came to convey my gratitude for Miss McCarthy's assistance in that lane. My niece might have been gravely injured without her." Lady McCarthy laughed lightly, as if bravery were a charming household trick she had trained. "Helena is eager, certainly." "I also came," the Duke continued, "to make an offer." Silence sharpened. "My niece has recently lost her mother. She requires a temporary governess who possesses steadiness and good judgment. I am additionally in need of a copyist for private correspondence while my secretary recovers from illness. I should like to engage Miss McCarthy in both capacities with wages." Lady McCarthy blinked. "I fear you mistake her position. Helena is my daughter." "Stepdaughter," Helena said before she could stop herself. Lady McCarthy's fan snapped open. "And dependent upon this household." Ashford's voice remained level. "My offer is for paid service, not patronage." Helena felt everyone in the room become suddenly alert. The maid at the tea table, the footman by the door, even the fire. Lady McCarthy smiled without warmth. "You are kind, Your Grace, yet I cannot spare her just now. There are obligations, old obligations. You cannot know." The phrase pricked Helena's skin. Old obligations meant money. Money in this house meant leverage. The Duke did not press at once. "If obligations are financial, my steward can arrange advance wages." "How generous," Lady McCarthy said. "But no sum from outside alters family duty." Helena understood then that refusal would not be about duty at all. It would be about control and about whatever papers Lady McCarthy kept locked in her escritoire and brought out only when she wished to remind Helena that disobedience had a price. That evening, after the Duke departed with formal courtesies and no answer, Lady McCarthy summoned Helena to her private sitting-room. A decanter stood open on the table. Beside it lay a folded document weighted by a seal. "You embarrassed me today," she said. "I did not speak out of turn." "You breathed out of turn." Lady McCarthy slid the paper across the table. "Since you seem to entertain ideas of independence, you may read this and recall reality." Helena unfolded it. The handwriting in the body was unfamiliar. The signature at the bottom, in a shaky imitation, was her father's. It was a debt acknowledgement for a substantial sum, secured against the daughter Helena McCarthy's settlement and future marriage portion, with enforcement rights transferred to Mr. Jonas Pryor, a creditor Helena had seen twice and disliked both times. "This is not my father's hand," Helena said quietly. "Do not be naive. Men sign many things in business. Mr. Pryor is patient, but patience tires. If I choose, I can settle this matter elegantly, with your consent to a sensible marriage, or inelegantly in court." Court? Scandal! Coercion dressed as propriety! Helena's mouth went dry. Lady McCarthy leaned back. "So when dukes come recruiting for curiosities, you will remember where your future lies." Helena refolded the paper with careful fingers and set it down. "May I go?" "You may do as you're told." In her small attic room, Helena sat fully dressed on the edge of the bed until the candle burned low. Rain tapped the roof like impatient knuckles. Below, the household settled into sleep. The Duke's offer had opened a door, but doors could lead to freedom, or to another locked chamber with finer wallpaper. If she stayed, Lady McCarthy would tighten the noose with debt and marriage. If she left without protection, she might be dragged back by law, rumour, or forged ink. A woman without money was vulnerable. A woman without reputation was finished. She pressed her palms together until the trembling stopped. Her father's voice came back to her, memory clear as if he sat beside her with ledgers spread between them. "Never sign what you have not read. Never yield what is yours because someone speaks loudly. Paper can steal as neatly as a pistol." By dawn she had decided only this: she would not be traded to Mr. Pryor like furniture. Whether at Ashford House or anywhere else, she would begin gathering proof, names, dates, hands behind signatures. Survival had carried her this far. It would not carry her much farther alone. By full light she was already dressed again, ink on her fingers and a sealed note in her hand. She waited in the back passage until Molly came yawning down with coal dust on her cheek. "Will you do me a kindness?" Helena asked. Molly blinked awake at the tone. "If I can, miss." "Take this to Ashford House. Give it to no one but the porter, and say it is for his Grace's hand, not the housekeeper, not a maid. Do you understand?" Molly looked at the seal, then back at Helena. "Yes, miss." Helena pressed a coin into her palm, one of the few she possessed outright, and closed Molly's fingers around it. "If anyone asks, you went for yeast." By breakfast, Lady McCarthy had resumed her ordinary campaign of petty cruelties, which was almost a relief in its predictability. She found fault with the toast, with the fire, with Helena's cuff ribbons, and finally with Helena's silence. "You look like a martyr in a chapel window," she said over her chocolate. "Do stop it. It is unbecoming." Helena spread marmalade on bread she could not taste. "I have no wish to be becoming, ma'am." Lady McCarthy's eyes narrowed. "You have, I think, too many wishes." A knock at the door interrupted whatever reply Helena might have risked. The butler entered with unusual stiffness. "Your Grace," he announced. Sebastian Vale crossed the threshold as if he had never doubted it would open for him. Rain had dried from his coat. His injured arm was now neatly bound beneath black cloth. Beside him stood an older gentleman Helena had not seen before, spare and silver-haired, with the calm expression of a man who made his living from other people's panic. Lady McCarthy rose in startled delight that sharpened quickly to caution. "Your Grace, we are honoured again." "Mrs. McCarthy." He inclined his head. "This is Mr. Jonathan Fenwick, my family solicitor." At the word solicitor, Lady McCarthy's fan paused halfway open. Ashford remained standing. "I have come regarding my offer to Miss McCarthy." Lady McCarthy smiled. "As I said, family duties prevent—" "Miss McCarthy is of age," Mr. Fenwick said mildly. "She may enter paid employment under her own name. His Grace and I have prepared a temporary contract for 12 weeks, renewable by mutual consent. Wages to be paid directly to Miss McCarthy." He placed the document on the table. Helena did not move toward it until Lady McCarthy gave a brittle laugh. "How very formal! Surely we are not litigating breakfast." "We are avoiding confusion," Ashford said. Lady McCarthy turned to Helena, voice honeyed and poisonous at once. "You have been soliciting this behind my back." "I sent one note this morning," Helena said, "to accept an offer of work." "For wages," Lady McCarthy repeated, as if tasting something sour. "How progressive!" Ashford's gaze flicked once to Helena, then to the paper. "Miss McCarthy should read before she signs." Her father would have approved of that. Helena stepped forward, read every line twice, and found the clauses clean. Duties clear, dismissal terms fair, references guaranteed, wages substantial enough to matter. No hidden surrender, no trap in ornamented language. She signed. Lady McCarthy watched the pen move as if it were a knife drawn at table. "You mistake yourself if you imagine this alters your obligations." "Any lawful obligation may be presented to Mr. Fenwick," Helena said, folding her copy. "I will answer it in writing." Something hot flashed in Lady McCarthy's face and vanished. "Go, then," she said softly. "See whether dukes keep servants who forget their place." Ashford House sat on a rise above the city. Its pale stone facade severe rather than welcoming, windows bright as polished metal in winter sun. Helena arrived in a hired cart with one trunk, 2 books, and a mended cloak that announced exactly what she was. Not a lady guest, not wholly a servant, an uncertain category everyone would test. The housekeeper, Mrs. Doring, received her in the side hall with impeccable civility and no warmth. "You are expected," she said. "Your room is in the east corridor, nursery at 8, study at 10. His Grace dislikes delay." "I dislike it as well," Helena said. Mrs. Doring's brows rose a fraction, as if making a note under some internal heading. The nursery was full of ordered cheer, painted blocks, stitched animals, a globe, shelves of French readers, and in the middle of it sat the child from the overturned carriage, legs tucked beneath her on a window seat, staring out at bare branches in the sleet. "Miss Marian," the nursemaid whispered, "your new governess." Marian Vale turned, and Helena saw at once what grief had done. Taken colour from the child's face and left watchfulness in its place, 8 years old and already braced for loss. "Do you remember me?" Helena asked, a small nod. "You pulled me out." "Yes," Marian considered this. "Everyone keeps saying I was very brave. I wasn't. I couldn't breathe." "Brave is not the same as unafraid," Helena said. "It is breathing anyway." By the 3rd day, Marian had stopped refusing meals. By the 5th, she slept through one night without waking the house with muffled sobs. Helena did not force lessons at once. They walked the gallery, named paintings, copied lines of poetry in large, uneven hands, and built routines sturdy enough for a child to lean against. Grief hated routine. That was precisely why routine helped. At 10 each morning, Helena reported to the Duke's study, where order reigned with military rigidity, correspondence bundled by region, tenant ledgers by parish, parliamentary papers in locked trays. Ashford spoke little beyond necessity. 2 copies of this to be sent by express. Summarise these 3 reports before dinner. Any letter mentioning rents in arrears comes to me directly. His politeness had a frost edge to it. He did not invite conversation. He did not at first look at her longer than duty required, yet he read every page she copied and corrected. He noticed if the right margin drifted by half an inch. On a wet Tuesday, Helena paused over a draft from his solicitor in Wiltshire and asked, "Did you intend to renew the lease at Low Barrow Farm at the old rate?" Ashford looked up. "No. Why?" "The draft records 12 years, but your instruction here says 21. If signed, your tenant may be turned out before his son reaches majority." He crossed the room in 3 strides, took the paper and scanned it. A muscle in his jaw tightened. "Who else has seen this?" "Only me." "Send no reply yet. Bring me the previous lease." By evening he had written 3 letters and dismissed 1 clerk from local duty. At dinner, when she rose from Marian's tray to withdraw, he said, without looking directly at her, "Thank you, Miss McCarthy." It was the first unscripted thing he had said to her. She answered, "It is my work, Your Grace." In the yard 2 days later, a stable lad slipped on ice beneath a mare's flank and took a hoof to the ribs. Men shouted. Someone ran for the groom. No one moved quickly enough. Helena dropped the basket she was carrying and went straight into the chaos, one hand on the mare's halter, voice low and firm, angling her weight until the animal shifted clear. The boy, white-lipped and shaking, tried to rise. "Don't!" Helena said, kneeling in slush. "Breathe shallow. Tom, fetch blankets. And send for the surgeon now, not in 10 minutes. When she looked up, the Duke was on the steps watching, expression unreadable. That evening, a tray appeared in her room with hot broth and a note in a precise hand. "For your hands. You were bareheaded in the yard. No signature, none needed." Warmth in Ashford House, Helena discovered, arrived like winter sun, briefly, and only where one stood still enough to notice. But outside those walls, weather gathered. Lady McCarthy's first letter came folded inside a package of Marian's forgotten ribbons. The script was elegant, the threats inelegant. "Your theatrical flight has amused Bath. Mr. Pryor is less amused. Return at once, and we may settle this privately. Persist, and I shall be obliged to protect the family name in ways you will not enjoy." Helena burned it in her grate and kept the ash. The second did not come to her, but to Mrs. Doring, who delivered it with visible reluctance. "I thought you should see this," the housekeeper said, "as it concerns your standing here." The letter from an acquaintance of Lady McCarthy's warned that Miss Helena McCarthy was ambitious beyond station, known to embroider accounts, and dangerously attentive to gentlemen of rank. Helena read to the end without changing expression, then folded it. "Thank you for showing me," she said. Mrs. Doring hesitated. "I do not credit unsigned malice, but others may." "I know." By week 3, whispers had begun among the lower staff. Nothing open, nothing she could challenge, just silences when she entered, glances over silver trays, a maid who stopped mid-sentence at Helena's approach. Silk instead of ash, she thought once, and the same old chill beneath it. Then confidential papers vanished. It happened on a Saturday. A packet of estate correspondence concerning mine rights in the north, sealed and logged by the clerk at noon, missing from the Duke's locked desk by 4. Only 4 people had entered the study in that window. Ashford, his valet with coal, Helena with copied drafts, and a footman delivering tea. The footman swore he had not crossed the threshold. The valet had served Ashford 20 years. Helena was new, literate, and already inconvenient to someone. Ashford summoned her after supper. The study fire burned low. Rain needled the windows. "A packet is missing," he said. "So I heard." "You were in this room at 1:30. "Yes." His face gave little away. "Did you touch the north ledger tray?" "I touched nothing not assigned to me." A beat of silence. You understand why I must ask. I understand perfectly, Helena said. Outsiders are useful until trust becomes expensive. Colour rose briefly along his cheekbones, anger perhaps, at her or at himself. That is unfair. It is accurate. I have accused you of nothing. Not allowed. They stood looking at each other across the desk, both too controlled to retreat. At last he said, quieter, I did not want you drawn into house politics. I am already in them. She left before either of them could make it worse. By Monday she had made up her mind. She would resign before dismissal could stain her name. Better to leave by choice than be pushed and called grateful for the shove. She spent the morning assembling fair copies, finishing Marian's lesson plans for the fortnight, and writing a letter to Mr. Fenwick requesting guidance about the debt paper Lady McCarthy had shown her. In the afternoon, Mrs. Dorring appeared at the schoolroom door. His Grace asks that you sort the older estate packets in the West Archive. The underclerk is ill. Now, if you please. The West Archive occupied 2 narrow rooms above the study, cold and underused, dust thick on boxes tied with fading ribbon. Helena set to work with methodical fury, separating parish records from legal abstracts, noting years, initials, missing seals. If she was to leave, she would at least leave order. Near dusk, she opened a misfiled bundle labelled Vale Trust, Minor Properties, and found, sandwiched between 2 unrelated rent rolls, a document bearing her own surname. She frowned, drew it out, and felt the blood drain from her face. It was a codicil to her father's will, properly witnessed, properly sealed, date clear. In it, Patrick McCarthy bequeathed the bathhouse and attached income into trust for his daughter Helena until her marriage or her 30th year, with Lady McCarthy granted residence only as guardian and administrator, not owner. There were conditions for maintenance, accounting, and penalties for misappropriation. Penalties. Helena sat down hard on the wooden stool, the paper trembling once in her hand before she steadied it. Years of insults, rationed candles, sold silver explained by necessary economies, threats of dependence. Each line rearranged itself under this single page. Lady McCarthy had not merely been cruel, she had concealed. Footsteps sounded on the stair. Helena turned, codicil half hidden against her skirt, as Ashford entered the archive room, coat unbuttoned, expression set. Mrs. Dorring said you had not come down to tea, he began, then stopped when he saw her face. What is it? She rose and held out the document. Legal advice, Your Grace, nothing more. He took it, scanned the first paragraphs, and looked up sharply. Where did you get this? From your files. Misbound with Vale Trust papers. That is impossible. Evidently not. He read to the end in silence, then read again more slowly. If this is authentic, and it appears to be, your stepmother has been administering property she does not own, and threatening to marry me to a creditor against a debt my father likely never signed. Ashford's eyes lifted to hers. The cold reserve she had first seen in him was still there, but cracked now by something more volatile. Why did you not tell me all of this sooner? Because men with power often enjoy solving women's problems privately, Helena said. Then expect gratitude in place of justice. His jaw tightened. You think that is what I want? I think wanting and doing are not the same thing. For a moment he seemed about to answer in anger. Instead he set the codicil down with great care, as if it might ignite. The missing packet was found, he said abruptly, in a dispatch case sent by mistake to the steward's office. You were never under formal suspicion. Informal suspicion is enough to ruin someone. Yes, he said, I know. Silence flooded the room, thick as dust. Rain tapped the roof. Somewhere below, a door closed softly. Helena drew breath. "I came intending to resign this evening." His head came up. "No, it is not a request for permission." "Then take this as an argument, not an order. If you leave now, Lady McCarthy controls the story. She will say you were dismissed for theft." Helena did not answer. He stepped closer, then checked himself, hands clasped behind his back, as if restraining the impulse to reach for certainty. "I cannot undo what has been done to you," he said, voice lower. "But I can put my name where it has weight. Fenwick will petition Chancery at once. We will authenticate the codicil, subpoena the estate books, and freeze any transfer to Prior. We, if you permit it," she studied him, "on the price." A flicker of hurt crossed his face, unguarded enough to be almost boyish before discipline reclaimed him. "The price," he said, "is that you allow me to stand beside you in public when this breaks, not before you. Beside—" Something in her chest shifted, wary and unwilling and not entirely resistant. "I do not need rescue," she said. "I know." He exhaled once, rough. "God help me, Helena, that is exactly the difficulty." Her name in his mouth, without title, without distance, stilled her. He looked away first, toward the window where rain blurred the city lights into smudged gold. When he spoke again, composure had gone thin as paper. "There is something else you should hear from me before anyone else tells you," he said. "I have said your name in my sleep," he admitted. "My staff informed me." Helena stared at him, sure she had misheard. He gave a short, humourless laugh. "Mrs. Doring is too loyal to gossip and too conscientious to lie when asked directly whether I am unwell. Apparently I am unwell, in a very specific fashion." In spite of everything, fear, anger, the weight of the codicil between them, Helena felt the edge of a smile threaten and suppressed it. "This is not a declaration," he said quickly, as if to protect her from it. "It is a fact. I will not use position gratitude or legal aid to press any claim upon you. If you leave tomorrow, I will still proceed exactly as promised." She believed him. That was the dangerous part. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over Bath. Helena looked down at her father's signature, then back at the Duke, who had just handed her both an advantage and a vulnerability in the same breath. "Very well," she said at last. "We proceed in daylight with documents and witnesses." A shadow of relief moved through him. "In daylight? And your Grace," she added, folding the codicil and tucking it inside her reticule, close against her ribs like a recovered pulse, "if you say my name in your sleep again, see that your staff keeps better confidence." For the first time since she had known him, Sebastian Vale smiled fully, quick and astonished, as if the expression had not visited his face in years. "Yes, Miss McCarthy," he said, "I shall issue strict instructions." A knock sounded before either of them could move farther into that strange, bright moment. Ashford's expression closed at once, though not completely. "Come." Mrs. Doring stepped in, took in their faces, and wisely looked at the papers instead. "Mr. Fenwick has arrived, Your Grace. He says it concerns an urgent filing." "Send him up." When the solicitor entered, Helena had already spread the codicil on the cleared crate, weighing each corner with account books to keep it flat. Fenwick read it with the concentration of a surgeon examining a wound. "Well," he said at last very softly, "that is either your salvation, Miss McCarthy, or the beginning of a very ugly war." "I assume it can be both," Helena replied. "It can." He tapped the lower margin. "Witnesses appear proper, seal intact. We need 3 things immediately: certified copies, verification against probate registry, and an injunction freezing any transfer of property or marriage settlement tied to this supposed debt." "Tonight!" Ashford asked. "Within the hour, if you want any chance of outrunning her." Helena watched the two men move from words to action like officers under fire. Wax was melted. Copies were made in Helena's own careful hand and signed by Fenwick. Ashford dispatched riders, one to the probate clerk, one to a barrister in town, one to his steward with instructions to deny access to any person bearing McCarthy authority without written order. By midnight, the original codicil lay in a locked dispatch box in Ashford's study, and Helena held one copy sewn into the lining of her reticule. By morning, Lady McCarthy had struck back. Not in court first, in drawing rooms. By noon, two ladies who had never once spoken to Helena in kindness had sent notes of concern to Mrs. Doring regarding the moral atmosphere appropriate for His Grace's young niece. By one, a pamphlet had appeared at the circulating library, anonymous, vulgar, and unmistakably targeted, describing a certain ink-fingered adventuress elevated above station. By two, a footman at Ashford House had repeated, within Helena's hearing, that she had wept in the Duke's study till he promised her jewels. He went red and stammering when she turned to him, but the damage was not in his embarrassment. It was in the way two others pretended not to have listened. At 3, Mr. Jonas Pryor arrived in person. He came with a hired carriage, a too-bright waistcoat, and the confidence of a man who believed law was simply another object that could be purchased if one knew whom to bribe. The porter kept him in the front hall. Helena was in the schoolroom with Marion conjugating French verbs when Mrs. Doring entered, face stiff. "Miss McCarthy, His Grace requests your presence in the small drawing-room at once." Pryor stood before the fireplace as if he owned the marble. He smiled when Helena entered. "Miss McCarthy, you run quickly when a purse opens." Ashford stood opposite him, perfectly still. Fenwick sat at a side table with papers and a quill already uncapped, as if recording evidence. "State your business and leave," Ashford said. Pryor spread gloved hands. "My business is my betrothed." Helena felt the word like a slap and kept her spine straight. "I'm not betrothed to you." "Not by affection, perhaps. By contract." He produced a folded paper. "Debt secured by paternal acknowledgement and maternal agreement. I have been patient." Fenwick took the document without touching Pryor's hand, scanned it, and gave Helena a single look that said, "Forged, but dangerous." Pryor continued, enjoying himself. "A lady's reputation is such delicate glass. One does hate to see it shattered. If Miss McCarthy returns home and behaves sensibly, no one need know details." "Everyone already knows the details you invented," Helena said. His smile sharpened. "Then you see my efficiency." Ashford moved half a step forward. Fenwick rose at once, a quiet barrier. "Mr. Pryor," Fenwick said, "you are now trespassing. Leave this house. Any further claim must come through me." Pryor's eyes flicked to Ashford. "And if I suggest to certain papers that your Grace has concealed a dependent female and interfered in a lawful engagement?" "Then," Ashford said, voice almost pleasant, "you will discover the difference between slander in a coffee-house and slander in King's Bench." For a heartbeat, Pryor looked uncertain. Then he tucked his paper away and bowed with theatrical mockery. "Tomorrow, then," he said to Helena, "at the upper rooms. Your family expects you." When he was gone, silence held for 2 breaths. 3. Fenwick exhaled first. "He is bluffing in half and dangerous in the other half." "What will I lose if he wins?" Helena asked, because she wanted no one pretending now. Fenwick answered plainly, "Your legal freedom, potentially your property, certainly your name. And His Grace's household will be dragged through scandal thick enough to choke it." Marion knocked on the half-open door just then, clutching her exercise slate. "Miss Helena!" Nurse says I am not to come downstairs any more when visitors call. Did I do wrong?" Helena knelt to her level. "No, darling. Grown people are behaving badly. That is not your fault." Marion searched her face with grave intensity. "Are you going away?" Helena opened her mouth and could not, for a moment, make a promise she was not sure she could keep. They went to the probate office at 10 the next morning, under a sleet that turned cobbles to slush. Helena sat opposite Fenwick in the carriage with the dispatch box between them like a third passenger. Ashford rode ahead on horseback, despite Fenwick's protest that dukes did not need to attend clerical verifications personally. "I am aware what dukes need," Ashford had said. Inside the probate building, heat smelled of damp wool and dust. Clerks moved with institutional slowness until Fenwick's car changed their pace. They were shown to a records room where shelves climbed to the ceiling in labelled rows. The chief clerk, Mr. Halden, thin and apologetic, took the codicil copy and consulted a ledger index. "McCarthy, Patrick. Yes, will proved, and—" His finger stopped. He frowned and turned pages back, then forward. "That is odd." Fenwick's voice went very calm. "What is odd?" The registry notation references an attached codicil, but the attachment file is empty. Empty as in misplaced? Empty as in removed. Helena felt cold spread through her chest despite the stove. Fenwick leaned in. "Removed by whom?" Halden looked trapped. "There is no signed withdrawal." Ashford, behind them, said, "Then someone stole from a probate archive." Halden swallowed. "I cannot accuse. There was a flood leak last spring. Some boxes were transferred." Fenwick held out his hand. "Show me transfer logs." There were no transfer logs for that file. Worse came an hour later. Of the two listed witnesses to Patrick McCarthy's codicil, one was dead these 4 years. The other, a retired apothecary named Larkin, received them in his cramped sitting room with shaking hands and frightened eyes. "I never signed any codicil," Larkin said before Fenwick finished introducing himself. Helena stared. "Sir, your name is here. I remember you at our house when my father was ill." Larkin would not meet her gaze. "Memory is uncertain. I was called for medicines, nothing more." Fenwick set the copy on his table. "Mr. Larkin, false testimony in chancery." "I said what I said." Larkin's wife appeared in the doorway, white-faced, twisting her apron. On the sideboard, Helena saw, in plain sight, a new silver tea service no apothecary's pension bought. Outside, sleet struck Helena's cheeks like thrown sand. Ashford swore once under his breath, abrupt and raw. "Bribed," Fenwick said, "or threatened." "Can we compel him?" Helena asked. "Eventually. Not before tomorrow's hearing, certainly not before social theatre turns to legal fact." They returned to Ashford House in gathering dark. Halfway up the drive, Mrs. Doring met them in the vestibule with a folded note and eyes that could not hide distress. "It came by express for Miss McCarthy," she said. The note bore Lady McCarthy's seal. "As your present employers seem slow to educate you in consequence, allow me. Since you have preferred defiance to obedience, I have made arrangements for your future to be settled publicly. Tomorrow evening at the upper rooms before witnesses, Mr. Pryor will be acknowledged. Should you fail to appear, legal notice for debt enforcement will be lodged at dawn and circulated with your correspondence. I trust you own at least one gown suitable to repentance." Helena handed it to Fenwick without comment. He read, jaw tightening. "She means to force social fact before legal review. If a public acknowledgement is witnessed and printed, magistrates become less curious about signatures. And if I do not go, default narrative, ungrateful dependent hidden by a duke, refusing lawful obligations." There was a second blow waiting. Mrs. Doring cleared her throat. "Miss Marian has asked for you twice each hour. I did not know how to answer." Her voice thinned. "And forgive me. For the child's protection, I have moved your sleeping room from the east corridor to the old steward's cottage by the rear gate, only until this is resolved." Helena understood. Not cruelty, containment, respectability. Still, it landed like exile. "I see," she said. That evening she packed her trunk herself. Marian clung to her at the nursery door, furious tears on her face. "They are sending you away because of me," the child cried. "No!" Helena held her tightly. "Because people are frightened. That is different." "Will you come back tomorrow?" Helena kissed her hair. "I will try." In the cottage the fire smoked, and the bed was narrow. For the first time since leaving Lady McCarthy's house, Helena felt the old helplessness creep in at the edges. That paper could be altered, witnesses bought, truth delayed until it no longer mattered. She sat at the small table, shoulders bowed, and let herself be afraid for exactly 5 minutes by the clock. Then she unfolded a fresh sheet and began listing every date she could remember. Market bills unpaid, silver sold, rents collected, names of servants dismissed after asking questions. Facts were still facts, even when men lied about them. A soft knock came near midnight. Ashford stood in the doorway, cloak damp, hat in hand, as if he were calling on a stranger. "I should not stay," he said. "No," Helena agreed and stepped back so he could enter. He left before dawn, but sleep did not come. Sebastian sat in his study with the fire burned low, and Fenwick's memoranda spread untouched across the blotter. The house was quiet in that peculiar hour when night servants moved like ghosts, and no respectable thought felt entirely reliable. He had spent 20 years mastering control as other men mastered languages. Control had built estates, secured votes, kept scandal from his door and tenderness from his throat. Control had not prepared him for a woman in a smoking cottage making lists by candlelight because the law had failed her by noon. He rubbed a hand over his face and found stubble. He had not noticed he'd missed shaving. On the shelf above his desk stood a miniature of his sister Eleanor, Marian's mother, painted at 17, laughing at something outside the frame. He had failed her too, in a different register, not by malice, by distance. He had believed money and doctors and correct arrangements were equivalent to love. By the time he understood they were not, pneumonia had done its efficient work. Marian's grief had broken him open in places he preferred sealed. Helena had walked into those same places without asking permission and put order where there had been silence. He had wanted from the first week to protect her. That impulse frightened him nearly as much as wanting her. His father had protected women all his life, governesses with pretty hands, widows with slim fortunes, until protection and possession were indistinguishable. Sebastian had watched one of them leave in tears while his mother sat upstairs pretending migraine. He had been 13 and had sworn never to make a woman's safety contingent on his favour. Now, favour was exactly what the world believed Helena lived on. A tap at the door. Fenwick entered, spectacles off, looking older than usual. "You haven't slept," he said. "Neither have you." Fenwick sat without invitation, an old friend's privilege. "You are considering something rash." "I am considering buying Prior's debts, his printer, and perhaps his spine." "Ah, very rash." Sebastian stared at the banked coals. "If I act too forcefully, I prove every accusation. If I stand back, she stands alone against forged paper and purchased witnesses." "Then do what she asked," Fenwick said. "Daylight, documents, witnesses. No heroic shortcuts." He gave a short laugh, devoid of humour. I'm not built for helpless observation. No, but you are capable of restraint, which is rarer and often more useful. Fenwick leaned forward. Do you love her? Sebastian did not answer at once. The old instinct to deflect, to redefine, to call it admiration, rose and failed. Yes, he said finally, and I do not know whether that is gift or hazard to her. Both, Fenwick said, so be honest and be careful, in that order. When Fenwick had gone, Sebastian took out stationery and wrote a note to Helena in his own hand. I cannot promise ease. I can promise this. I will not let convenience or pride speak in your place. If tomorrow costs me reputation, so be it. If it costs you safety, I have failed. He sanded the ink, folded the page, and did not send it. Promises were cheap at 4 a.m. Better to keep one in silence than make 10 aloud. By afternoon the crisis had hardened from rumour to machinery. A magistrate's courier delivered formal notice. Miss Helena McCarthy was required to attend a family settlement acknowledgement at the Upper Rooms Assembly that evening, in the presence of named witnesses, regarding disputed debts and intended marriage articles with Mr. Jonas Pryor. Failure to attend could be interpreted as evasion pending civil attachment. Interpreted, Fenwick said bitterly, reading it. A lovely, elastic word. Along with the notice came printed invitation cards already circulating through Bath. Mrs. McCarthy requests the honour, celebration of an advantageous family alliance. Miss Helena McCarthy, Mr. Jonas Pryor. Helena held one card between finger and thumb as if it might stain. She means to trap me in public, she said. If I refuse, I'm guilty. If I appear and stay silent, I consent. And if you appear and speak, Fenwick said, you challenge her before half the town. Mrs. Doring entered then with unexpected haste. Behind her hovered Molly, cap askew, cheeks red from running, clutching a wrapped bundle to her chest. I found her at the kitchen gate demanding to see Miss Helena, Mrs. Doring said. Molly bobbed a curtsy and thrust the bundle forward. From Mrs. Gray, miss. She said only you'd know what it is. I hid it under turnips so no one 'ud take it. Helena unwrapped coarse cloth to reveal 2 ledgers, water-stained but intact, and a packet of folded receipts tied with blue thread. Her breath caught. Lady McCarthy's old household books, the ones Helena had balanced for years before being pushed to cleaner copies. Originals with crossings out and sums that never matched what visitors were shown. Where did she get these? Helena asked. Cook says her ladyship told Briggs to burn old trash this morning, Molly said. Mrs. Gray took these first and sent me running. Fenwick was already turning pages, eyes sharpening with each line. Dear God! Here, rent income diverted, gaming debts disguised as repairs, payments to Pryor unrecorded in declared accounts. This is excellent. This is dynamite. Ashford looked from the ledgers to Helena. Can you prove the hand? Yes, she said. Mine in the margins. Lady McCarthy's corrections. Dates, suppliers, signatures. A footman appeared in the doorway. Carriage is ready, Your Grace. Upper Rooms traffic is already thick. Rain had started again, soft and relentless, as if Bath itself were holding its breath. Fenwick gathered codicil copy, ledgers and notices into a leather case. We still lack registry confirmation and a living cooperative witness. This is not tidy. I am done waiting for tidy, Helena said. Ashford met her gaze. No frost now, no distance. Then we go, he said. From the hall below came the first roll of wheels over wet stone, and the clock began striking the hour as they moved for the door. The rain had sharpened to needles by the time their carriage reached the upper rooms. Light spilled from every window. Music leaked in thin, bright strands whenever the doors opened, and half of Bath seemed to have arrived early for the pleasure of witnessing someone else's ruin. Inside, heat and perfume struck like a wall. Chandeliers blazed over polished floors and crowded silks. A card table had been pushed back to clear a space near the musicians, where Lady McCarthy stood in amethyst satin with Mr. Pryor at her side, receiving congratulations as if the engagement were already fact. A magistrate's clerk waited nearby with a leather folio. Two gentlemen Helena recognised from Lady McCarthy's whist circles hovered close, eager as vultures and better dressed. Lady McCarthy saw Helena first. Triumph lit her face. "There she is!" she called, loud enough to carry. Conversation broke apart and reformed around the words. "My poor dear child, at last come to her senses." Helena handed her cloak to a footman and stepped forward in plain deep blue silk she had chosen precisely because it looked neither bridal nor apologetic. Fenwick moved to one side, Ashford to the other. Not a head. Pryor smiled, all teeth. "Miss McCarthy, you keep a gentleman waiting." "I am not your gentleman's concern," Helena said, "nor your wager." Lady McCarthy gave a light laugh for the room. "Nerves! Entirely natural. Mr. Pryor has been most understanding of your little detour." The magistrate's clerk cleared his throat. "If the parties are present, I am instructed to witness acknowledgement of debt settlement and intended marriage articles." "Proceed," Pryor said. "Stop," Helena said, and the single word landed hard enough that the violinist's bow stuttered once before recovering. She turned not to the clerk, not to Pryor, but to the room. "Since Mrs. McCarthy has chosen publicity, let us have full publicity. I contest both the alleged debt and any claim of engagement. I have documents and witnesses. So does she, no doubt. We can either hear them now or hear them under oath with greater expense." A ripple moved through the crowd, scandal sharpening into interest. Lady McCarthy's fan snapped open. "Do not be melodramatic, Helena. You have always had a taste for scenes." "And you," Helena said, "for signatures." Fenwick stepped forward then, voice carrying with professional ease. "Jonathan Fenwick, solicitor for Miss McCarthy. Notice has been filed this afternoon for injunction and chancery review. Pending decision, any forced acknowledgement may constitute coercion." Pryor barked a laugh. "Filed is not granted." "True," Fenwick said. "Yet," Lady McCarthy's eyes flashed. "Your Grace," she said sweetly to Ashford, "is this your doing? Hiding behind lawyers to shield a dependent?" Ashford's expression did not alter. "Miss McCarthy speaks for herself." Helena drew the first ledger from Fenwick's case and held it up. "These are household books kept under my hand while resident in Mrs. McCarthy's house. Original volumes, not fair copies. They show rents from my father's property entered as repairs, gaming losses disguised as coal, and private payments to Mr. Pryor omitted from declared accounts." "Lies," Lady McCarthy said at once. "A servant's scribble." Helena opened to a marked page and passed it to the nearest neutral party she could find, Colonel Reeves, whose vanity loved being made useful. "Colonel, if you please, that correction in darker ink. Whose hand?" He peered startled into honesty. "Why, Lady McCarthy's, surely. I have seen it on invitations." A few heads turned. Lady McCarthy recovered quickly. "Annotations prove nothing." "Then let us discuss contracts," Helena said. She took out the debt paper Pryor had brandished earlier, and beside it her father's confirmed letters from old estate packets. "This is the signature claimed as my father's acknowledgement. Compare the capital P in Patrick. In his true hand it closes at the loop. Here it breaks. In his hand the final K descends below the line. Here it sits upright. The witness line lists Mr. Ellis, steward. Mr. Ellis died 6 months before the contract date." Pryor's smile thinned. Convenient scholarship. It gets less convenient, Helena said, and turned the page toward the light. The paper carries a watermark from Harling & Sons, 1809 issue. The contract is dated 1807. A murmur, louder now. Pryor's face changed by degrees, amusement flattening into calculation. Watermarks are not gospel. Paper merchants sit on stock. True, Helena said. Then perhaps you can explain why this old debt demands payment to you through notes issued by your own office at 30% interest, compounded monthly, with immediate marriage execution on default. It reads less like inheritance and more like acquisition. Lady McCarthy cut in, sharper. Enough! You are humiliating yourself. Clerk, record that my daughter refuses lawful family settlement under undue influence. Helena looked directly at the clerk. Record also that I deny being her legal dependent under a codicil to Patrick McCarthy's will. She held up the copy. Referenced in probate registry, attachment missing from archive, original in safekeeping pending court verification. Missing because it never existed, Lady McCarthy snapped. A dry voice sounded from behind the second row of spectators. I beg pardon, it did exist. Mrs. Gray, still in her best but unmistakably a cook, stood at the edge of the crowd with Molly half hidden behind her skirts and 2 wrapped bundles in her arms. The room's discomfort at servants intruding into gentility was almost audible. Helena stared. Mrs. Gray... The cook lifted her chin. You kept those books honest when no one else did, miss. I brought what was left from the burn basket. Receipts, rent notices and mister. Larkin's bill from the day your father signed his codicil proper. Lady McCarthy went white, then blotched crimson. How dare you come here? Briggs, remove them. No, Helena said. They stay. Pryor moved fast, stepping between Helena and the cook as if to snatch the packets. Ashford took 1 pace forward. Enough. Not touching, not threatening. Simply occupying space with ducal finality. Pryor stopped. Careful, Ashford said quietly. Pryor swallowed anger and swung back to bluster. This is a circus. I decline to submit my business to kitchen testimony. Then submit it to your own handwriting, Helena said. She took 1 receipt from Mrs. Gray and crossed to the nearest side table. Mr. Pryor, this is your acknowledgement for payment received from Lady McCarthy 2 years ago for retaining discretion regarding McCarthy girl's portion. Your clerk initialed the margin. Those same initials appear on the marriage draft you brought to Ashford House. The clerk by the magistrate leaned forward despite himself. Several gentlemen craned necks. Pryor's hand twitched at his side. Lady McCarthy struck where she always had. Character. Even if every arithmetic grievance were true, she said, voice rising, what then? She is still what she is. Base in manner, grasping in ambition, raised by my charity, and now parading herself before a duke as if ink on her fingers made her equal. The old words, sharpened for years, came back at Helena like thrown knives. This time she did not duck. Your charity, Helena said, each syllable clear, consisted of using my father's income while calling me burden. Your guardianship consisted of concealing his will. Your motherhood consisted of trying to sell me to this man to keep your creditors quiet. If I am base, Mrs. McCarthy, it is only in that I learned economy from watching you spend what was not yours. A gasp, then silence so complete the music died entirely. Lady McCarthy laughed once, brittle and high. You ungrateful little... Dates, Helena said over her. Shall we return to dates? June 12th, 4 tenant rents collected, not entered in declared book. August 3rd, silver sold as plate repair. September 19th, payment to Pryor through Mrs. Pennington's account. October 1st, Draft of debt instrument with my father's forged signature." "You cannot prove forgery." "Not tonight," Helena said. "In court, with ink analysis and sworn comparison, I can." Prior had been edging backward toward the side doors. Fenwick saw it and spoke without turning his head. "Mr. Prior, if you leave now, I file criminal complaint before your carriage reaches Queen Square." Prior's eyes darted. Doors, crowd, duke, clerk, witnesses, multiplying by the minute. Defiance collapsed into survival. "What do you want?" he hissed at Helena. "Withdraw every claim," she said. "In writing, witness now, return any instrument naming me security, and do not come within 50 yards of my person again." He sneered. Or I will spend every waking hour proving what you are." For the first time he believed her. Fenwick drew paper. The magistrate's clerk, suddenly eager to preserve his own reputation, offered his seal. Prior dictated through clenched teeth. No engagement existed. Debt claim disputed and voluntarily withdrawn pending adjudication. No attempt at attachment without court order. His signature shook on the final stroke. Lady McCarthy stared at him as if he had slapped her. "You coward!" she said. He rounded on her, mask gone. "You promised clean paper and pliable girl. You gave me a duke and ledgers." He threw down the pen and shouldered through the crowd, which opened just enough to let scandal pass. Lady McCarthy did not retreat. She stepped toward Helena, voice low and venomous. "You think this wins? You have dragged your own name through mud for a house with leaking roof and dead man's books." Helena met her gaze without blinking. "It is still my name." The magistrate's clerk closed his folio with a decisive snap. "Given contested inheritance and allegations of coercion, I cannot witness any family settlement tonight. I will report accordingly." Lady McCarthy's shoulders stiffened, as if held upright by rage alone. "You are all fools." "No," said a new voice from the back, Mrs. Pennington pearl-laden and suddenly prudent. "Only late." One by one, Lady McCarthy's allies discovered urgent reasons to speak to someone else. Cards vanished into reticules. Fans hid mouths that had been smiling seconds earlier. Social gravity shifted in visible increments, and Lady McCarthy stood briefly at the centre of an emptying circle. She looked once at Ashford, perhaps expecting intervention, censure, anything that would place the scene back under male authority. He said nothing. She looked at Helena, and what showed then was not remorse, only disbelief that obedience had ended. "Enjoy your victory," she said. "You always were plain. Now you are infamous as well." Helena answered, almost gently. "Infamy passes. Records remain." Lady McCarthy turned and walked out with her spine rigid and her train dragging through muddy footprints no one hurried to clean. Outside, rain hammered the carriage roof like thrown gravel. Helena sat opposite Fenwick and Ashford with the ledgers on her lap, hands steady by will alone. When the doors closed and the upper rooms fell away behind them, the shaking began. Small at first, then enough that the receipts rustled audibly. Fenwick pretended not to notice until they reached Ashford House and the lamps of the front hall glowed through the wet dark. Then he touched 2 fingers to his hat brim. "You did not merely survive tonight, Miss McCarthy," he said. "You established record. That matters." "It had better," Helena managed. "It will. Chancery hearing at 10 tomorrow. Eat breakfast even if you hate it." When he was gone, Ashford held out his hand for the ledgers. "May I?" She surrendered them, and only then realised how hard she had been gripping. Ink had transferred to her glove. In the library, the fire was banked high. She stood close enough to feel heat sting her knees through damp silk. For several minutes, neither spoke. "I nearly let Prior goad me into breaking his jaw," Ashford said at last. Helena huffed a weak laugh. "I noticed." "He deserved it." He did, but that would have made me look like your cause instead of my own. He met her eyes. Yes. Footsteps pattered in the corridor. Marion burst in, hair loose, night rail half untucked, nursemaid in scandalised pursuit. "I heard wheels," she said, breathless. "Did you win?" Children demanded truth stripped of ornament. Helena knelt and opened her arms. Marion threw herself into them. "Yes," Helena said into the child's hair. "I think we did." Marion pulled back, studying her face with solemn focus. "Are you still going away?" "Not tonight." Satisfied for now, Marion yawned hugely and leaned against Helena's shoulder. The nursemaid gathered her with apologies, and the room quieted again. Ashford poured brandy into one glass and water into another, offered Helena the water, and waited until she had drunk. "You were magnificent," he said. "I was terrified." "Those are not mutually exclusive." Her laugh this time was real, if brief. She set the glass down carefully. "Tomorrow could still go badly. Larkin may keep lying. Registry may keep misplacing files. Lady McCarthy will not forgive." "Nor forget," he said. "Neither will we." She looked at him then, really looked. Damp hair from the rain, cravat slightly askew for once, exhaustion under the composure. He had stood beside her exactly as promised. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not speaking over me." A pause. "Thank you," he answered, "for not sending me away." Morning came bright and mercilessly clear, as if the city had decided weather should not compete with scandal. Chancery sat in a cramped chamber that smelled of ink, wool, and old patience. Lady McCarthy arrived with 2 hired barristers and a hat too elaborate for the room. Prior arrived late and avoided everyone's eyes. Larkin arrived looking ill. When called, he repeated his denial, hands shaking, voice thin. Fenwick pressed. He resisted. The judge frowned. Helena requested permission to question on document sequence. The judge, curious, allowed it. "Mr. Larkin," she said, holding up his own apothecary bill from Mrs. Gray's bundle. "This is your invoice dated the afternoon my father executed his codicil. It lists laudanum, willow bark, and 1 travel fee. At bottom, whose initials acknowledge payment?" He squinted. "P.M. "My father's." "Yes! Yet you testified you were not present in his study that day." "I was in and out." She laid down a second paper. Larkin's pocket ledger, produced under summons from his assistant that morning, showing entry of "attending witness, McCarthy codicil, extra fee." The room shifted. Larkin sagged visibly. "I was told it was safer," he whispered. "Mrs. McCarthy said if I spoke of it, Mr. Prior would call my loan due and my son would lose the shop." The judge's pen scratched once, hard. Lady McCarthy hissed to her barrister. Prior cursed under breath. Registry clerks faced with perjury and a judge in no mood for institutional embarrassment found a transfer list by midday. The codicil attachment had been signed out years earlier by an agent bearing Lady McCarthy's authorization. The signature on withdrawal order matched her hand. By late afternoon, the orders were issued. Temporary control of McCarthy property transferred to court supervision pending full accounting. Lady McCarthy barred from disposing of assets. Prior enjoined from any claim upon Helena's person or portion. Inquiry opened into forgery and archive tampering. Lady McCarthy stood to hear it, colour gone waxy. "This is absurd," she said. "A conspiracy by sentimental men and an ungrateful girl." The judge removed his spectacles. "Mrs. McCarthy, I strongly advise you to stop speaking." She did not. She would be scrubbing floors without me. Helena answered before anyone else could. "I did scrub floors," she said, "for years. The difference now is that I am no longer on my knees." Lady McCarthy's mouth opened and shut. For one suspended second, Helena saw, beneath cruelty and vanity, a woman who had gambled every card and discovered she was not the only player at the table. Then bailiffs moved politely but firmly to escort her out. Prior slipped away before formal adjournment. By evening, word spread that 2 of his creditors had called in notes, and one printer had refused further anonymous broadsides without advance cash. That night, after Marion was asleep and Fenwick had finally gone home with a stack of orders under his arm, Helena stood alone in the Ashford orangery. Citrus trees breathed faint bitterness in the lamplit damp. Beyond the glass, the gardens were black and silver. She heard Sebastian before she saw him. "Mrs. Doring said you escaped us all." "I escaped congratulation," Helena said. "Different thing." He came to stand beside her, leaving a careful arm's length between them. "How are you?" She considered lying and chose not to. Relieved, furious, empty, hungry, ashamed of being hungry. His mouth tipped. "All sensible." Silence settled, not awkward, just full. "At court," he said after a moment, "when you said you were no longer on your knees, I nearly applauded. Fenwick kicked my boot." Helena laughed softly, then sobered. "Sebastian!" It was the first time she had used his name without title in waking daylight. He stilled. "I do care for you," she said, "enough to be frightened by it, but I will not step from one dependency into another and call it romance. If there is to be anything between us, it must be in the open. Visits, chaperones, time, and the right to say no without losing my footing." He turned fully toward her. In lamplight, his face held none of his usual practised reserve. "I love you," he said, plain as fact. "Not because you need me, you do not. Not because you admire me, you often do not. I love you because when you enter a room, I stop arranging myself and begin, inconveniently, to tell the truth." Helena's throat tightened. "I have been lonely for so long," he went on, voice roughening. "Not alone, lonely. Surrounded, obeyed, deferred to. None of it touched me. You did. You and Marion together have made this house feel inhabited rather than managed. I do not want to own you, Helena. I want to build a life with you and be answerable in it." She looked down, then up again. "Do you know what frightens me most? Not scandal, not poverty, being cherished in private and diminished in public." He nodded once. "Then hear me publicly now, even if only the orange trees witness. I will court you honourably. If you refuse me, I will still uphold every legal protection we began. Or if you accept, I will spend the rest of my life earning the trust you have already risked once." Her eyes stung. "That is a very good speech, Your Grace." "It is a terrible speech," he said. "It has been redrafted in my head for weeks." She stepped closer, close enough to see the pulse at his throat. "Then let me answer plainly. Yes, you may court me." His breath left him in something like astonishment. "Yes. Yes, with your aunt present when propriety requires. Letters that are legible, no ambush declarations in archives." A small, helpless smile. "I can likely manage 2 of the 3. She lifted her hand. He took it as if it were both privilege and pledge. When he bent to kiss her, it was gentle, deliberate, and asked rather than claimed. She answered in kind. When they drew apart, he rested his forehead briefly against hers. "I have said your name in my sleep," he murmured. She smiled against his mouth. "Try saying it while awake." "Helena!" There, in lamplit glass and citrus scent, something long braced between them, finally settled into place. Spring came to Bath in stubborn increments. Crocus first, then mud, then a week of impossible blue. On a clear April morning, Helena stood in her father's former study, while 3 workmen argued amiably over whether the cracked chimney could be saved. Dust motes spun in sunlight. The room smelled of plaster and fresh-cut pine. "It can be saved," Helena said, after examining the mortar line herself, "but not cheaply." The eldest mason scratched his chin. "You've your father's eye, miss." "So I'm told. And I pay on Friday, Mr. Hobb, if the invoices match the estimate." He grinned. "Aye, miss." In the hall, Mrs. Gray directed 2 maids unpacking kitchen crates with the authority of a field marshal. Molly, promoted to upper maid and very proud of it, carried curtains up the stairs and back down again when Helena pointed out she'd reversed east and west rooms. At noon, Fenwick arrived with final chancery papers. "Congratulations," he said, handing Helena the packet. "Full accounting accepted. Mrs. McCarthy removed as administrator permanently. Property and income restored to you. She is to reside under her brother's supervision in Bristol until further order. She may not contract debt against your name, person, or estate." Helena let out a breath she had not known she was still holding. "And Prior?" "Settled his immediate creditors by selling his warehouse at a loss. Under inquiry for forged instruments, he is suddenly very cooperative." From the doorway came Marian's delighted shout. "Miss Helena! Uncle says may I come in the dangerous room if I do not touch nails?" "Only if you wear boots," Helena called. Sebastian followed at a more dignified pace, his Aunt Lady Beatrice on his arm and a basket in his hand. "We brought luncheon," Lady Beatrice announced, "and supervision since my nephew has the morals of a saint, but the impatience of a boy." "Aunt," Sebastian said, scandalised, "do not aunt me. Where shall I sit where plaster cannot fall on me?" Laughter softened the old walls. After luncheon, while Lady Beatrice and Marian inspected wallpaper samples, with grave seriousness, Sebastian found Helena on the front steps. Rain had begun, light, silver, almost warm. Months ago, those same stones had frozen her hands raw under punishment. Now she stood in dry boots and gloves, keys in her pocket, rain on her face by choice. He held out a small velvet box. She looked at it, then at him. "In front of everyone?" "In daylight," he said. As instructed, she opened it. Inside lay a ring of old-cut diamonds around a dark sapphire the colour of midnight ink. "Helena McCarthy," he said, voice steady and entirely audible to the household bustling behind the half-open door. "Will you marry me?" She had imagined this moment in a dozen versions. Dramatic, private, impossible. The real thing was simpler and better. Rain, workmen shouting, Marian singing nonsense inside, and the man she loved standing without armour. "Yes," she said, "I will." Marian's shriek of triumph from the doorway suggested eavesdropping had occurred despite Lady Beatrice's strict governance. Mrs. Gray cried openly. Molly dropped a curtain and then pretended she had meant to. Their wedding, 6 weeks later at St. Michael's, was crowded enough to prove society's memory for advantage and short enough to preserve everyone's feet. Helena wore cream silk and her mother's plain pearl comb. Sebastian looked as if he had not slept and did not care who noticed. When the vicar said, "With all my worldly goods," Sebastian's voice caught on all, and Helena squeezed his hand once. At the breakfast, Colonel Reeves declared he had always known the match would do. Mrs. Pennington agreed with equal shamelessness. Lady Beatrice rolled her eyes so hard Marian choked on cake, laughing. That evening, rain returned. Gentle, steady, familiar. Helena stood at an upstairs window in Ashford House, now hers too, watching drops darken the stone steps below. Sebastian came behind her, slipped warm hands over hers, and rested his chin lightly on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She looked out at the glistening steps and remembered cold and buckets, and silence swallowed like blood. Then she looked down at his hands over hers, steady, unforced, real. "That once," she said. "My hands shook here from cold before breakfast." He turned her gently to face him. "And now?" "Now," she said, smiling, "they shake for better reasons." He laughed, kissed her forehead, and spoke her name, awake in the rain-lit dark, as if saying it were both promise and home.